Our scripture reading for the day comes from Ephesians 3rd chapter, verses 14 through 21. For this reason I bow my knees before the Father, from whom every family in heaven and on earth takes its name. I pray that according to the riches of his glory, he may grant that you be strengthened in your inner being with power through his Spirit, and that Christ may dwell in your hearts through faith, as you are being rooted and grounded in love. I pray that you may have the power to comprehend with all the saints what is the breadth and length and height and depth, and to know the love of Christ that surpasses knowledge, so that you may be filled with all the fullness of God. Now to him who by the power at work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than all we can ask or imagine. To him be glory in the church and in Christ Jesus, to all generations, forever and ever. Amen.
One of the things I'm doing these first few Sundays, it may go on for a little while, is trying to help you get to know me a little bit by sharing a little bit of my background. Today I want to share that I was raised on a cotton farm in Texas. It's near Lubbock, Texas. We still have a farm in the family. It's about 20 miles northwest of Lubbock. Anybody know where Lubbock is? A few of you do. For those of you who don't, it's generally about 4 hours directly south of Liberal, Kansas. More or less, that's pretty close. So it's flat land, and we grew cotton. On years when we were hailed out with cotton, we grew grain sorghum or soybeans. Occasionally, we would even grow sunflowers. That's how come I know up close and personal that sunflowers follow the sun. I shared with you last week that I have 2 children. Sarah lives in Boston, and she's 26. And Jeff is working on his master's at Missouri State University at Springfield, Missouri. And I am the third of my siblings. My brother is the oldest, my sister comes next, and I'm the third. My father, who was the farmer, loved the land, loved to farm, loved to see what God would produce. And my most favorite memory of him is him stooping down in late April to scoop up a handful of soil and to smell of it and to feel of it and see how it crumbled to the ground. And that's how he knew whether it was time to plant or not. And that memory is one of my fondest memories of my dad. He passed away in 2000, and I lost my mom last October. So that's a little bit more about me, and I'm going to try to get to know each one of you, your names, and get them correct, and also about you, your stories. So if I ask you about your story, I want to hear all about you. Now, one of my very favorite things is to watch movies. Don't get to do it that often anymore. And I certainly don't go to movie theaters, and I'm glad I don't after what's happened. Can't help but think about what happened in Louisiana, in Lafayette this last week. But one of my favorite movies is Mr. Holland's Opus. Maybe that's because I love music. Maybe that's because I recognize myself in the story. It's the story of a musician who just really wants to be a composer. Rather grudgingly, he takes a job teaching music at the local high school because it will give him time to write some music, he thinks. He finds out it's not so easy. And he can provide an income for him and his wife and later on a child. Now, one of his students that I relate to is a very serious, red-headed girl who plays the clarinet terribly, even though she practices constantly. As Mr. Holland works with her to try to help, he learns that she is the youngest in a family where everyone excels except her, or so she thinks. Because she's tried so hard and failed, she thinks she's a failure too. One day she comes into the music classroom and tells Mr. Holland that she's going to give up playing, and if he knows anybody who wants her clarinet, he can just give it to them. As she walks away, Holland asks her, "Is it any fun?" With a shrug, she answers, "I wanted it to be." "You know what we've been doing wrong, Miss Lang?" Holland says. "We've been playing the notes on the page." Confused, the girl asks, "Well, what else is there to play?" "Well, there's a lot more to music than notes on a page. Playing music is supposed to be fun. It's about heart. It's about feelings and moving people and something beautiful and being alive, and it's not about notes on a page. I can teach you notes on a page. I can't teach you all that other stuff." So he takes away the music she was practicing and tells her to try it without the music. She tries a time or two, and each time coming to a point where her clarinet squawks and squeaks, and she starts to kick herself for failing. So Mr. Holland says, "What do you like best about yourself?" With a shy smile, she says, "My hair, my red hair. My dad says it reminds him of a sunset." So Mr. Holland says, "Play the sunset." And she closes her eyes and she begins to play. Really play. Not just the notes, but the music. She is so amazed when she does the hard part perfectly that her eyes pop open and she stops playing. Mr. Holland shares her amazement and says, "Don't stop. Keep going." And so she plays on. Eyes closed, head beginning to sway with the rhythm of it. And we know that this time it's fun. And it's beautiful. And it's life-giving. And it's beyond anything she thought she could do. There's more to music than notes on the page. The notes themselves are limited. They're just notes. Until the heart plays the notes. Then it becomes music. I think faith is like that. Our faith is based in large part on what we read in the Bible. The Bible is the primary source for all we know about God. Through the testimony of the people, of their experiences of God, how God acted in their lives and the lives of others. God and God's purposes are revealed in the Bible. Our understanding of who God is or isn't, our knowledge of God's actions and of God's expectations, of God's preferred future, of God's possibilities, these are all based on the biblical word, words printed on paper. Faith based on the written biblical word alone will be faith based on knowledge, and that's great. But just like notes on a page doesn't become music until it's played from the heart, faith based on the written word of the Bible doesn't become powerfully spirit-filled until it is lived from the heart. That's what Paul is writing about in his letter to the Ephesians. He's talking about living, vibrant, spirited faith and life through which God will change the world. Yes, a spirit-filled and spirit-lived life of each member of the Ephesians churches, through whom God will change the world. God is still looking for the church and the members of it and the people who are part of it, gathered in God's name, to be spirit-filled and change the world. Now we remember, and if you were here last week, you know that I gave a little bit of background. The churches to whom this letter is written, and it's probably written, or at least conceived of, during the time Paul was in prison. So he's writing it perhaps from a prison point of view. The churches to whom this letter is addressed are experiencing conflict. Jews and Gentiles are brought together. They were experiencing great conflict and prejudice between the two of them. They were arguing over how to truly practice the faith and what made you acceptable to God. And Paul says, just prior to this prayer, Paul Christ Jesus because we're all sinners. And everyone needs to be forgiven. And everyone are saved by Jesus Christ. And so Paul is reminding them that they're unified. They're brought into one people through being one in Jesus Christ. Yet this church, or these groups of churches, they're anything but unified. Their disharmony is getting in the way of doing ministry, or doing God's work in the world. And in the previous section of Paul's letter, he's gone through that and reminded them that they need to come together so they may carry the message of love and harmony to the whole world. This particular passage for today is Paul's hopes and prayers for that conflicted church. It's a beautiful prayer. It's full of hope and love, and it's like lots of other prayers that Paul writes in his letters. It's like those prayers except for the next to last verse. Let me read it to you. It's verse 20. Now to him, God, who by the power at work within us is able to accomplish abundantly far more than all we can ask or imagine. And then he goes on to close it with a tautology. That is a weighty sentence, isn't it? It's got a lot packed in there, and it's a very strong statement of faith. Paul's trying to reach through the paper and the words on the paper to their hearts and get a grasp of them. Or actually, he's calling for the Spirit to grasp hold of their hearts. Let me read it again to you. Now to him, God, who by the power at work within us, working within us, is able to accomplish abundantly far more than all we could ask or imagine. There's a few key phrases that make that sentence make sense. And this is what Paul is basing his great hope and faith on. He's basing it on a living faith that he personally is experiencing, through which God can accomplish more than we can imagine. It's a faith that begins in the heart and is rooted in love. As he says, love is the rooting and the grounding of love. Now, biblical witness tells us that God is love. I mean, if you read from start to finish, the Bible tells us in many different places and many different ways that God is love. Jesus says God so loved the world that God wanted to offer salvation to all who believed. And Jesus says the greatest commandment is love. So love is all the way through it. And so being rooted and grounded in love provides the foundation for our faith and whatever we do or don't do with our faith. So our faith is rooted and grounded in God's love, and our faith can only be lived out through loving God and loving others. We can only experience the fullness of God's love when we extend our love visibly, actively to others. Not just others in the sanctuary, not just others in this church, but others in the world. Redwood trees are perhaps helpful in teaching us about this. Redwood trees, they can grow to heights of 350 feet. Now imagine that. That's huge, right? For little old short me, that seems really huge. Did you know that redwood roots are very shallow? Very shallow. Some redwoods roots never grow deeper than about 10 to 20 feet underground. And yet they support these towering trees and these huge trunks. And how is that possible? I've had big oak tree fall over because the roots were shallow, and it wasn't nearly 100 feet, much less 250, 350. Well, this is what gives them the foundation, is their roots. While they've got some big roots, most of their roots are skinny, and they're shallow, but what they do is they grow outward, and they intertwine with the roots of the other redwoods. And they form an interlocking web of roots and structure and support. And sometimes roots can extend 100 miles through this interlocking web of connection. And that's what gives The redwood trees their strength to stand firm and tall. It is God's love and God's love expressed that connects us and will connect us to those outside who so much need God's love. Well, Paul reminds us that Christ dwells in our hearts through the Spirit. And that's one of the reasons that he can say and experience that God can accomplish far more abundantly than we can imagine or even ask for. He's so assured of that because he knows the fullness of Christ living in his heart. He's experienced it. And he says that Christ dwells in our heart, comes to live in our hearts through the Spirit, and that we experience it, and that's how we experience the breadth and depth and height and width of Christ's love, is through the Spirit living in our hearts. And that love of Christ is infinite. It's beyond measure, beyond our understanding even, beyond our knowledge. And Paul's praying for each person and the churches as a whole. And I say churches because remember, Ephesus was like a crossroads town like Salina, and there were many different small house churches that met around town and surrounding areas. And so he's reminding these churches that to have a living faith, to accomplish God's purposes, they need Christ to dwell in their hearts, and they need the Spirit to do that. And it's the Spirit that provides that fullness and that experience of love. It's the Spirit's testimony, the Spirit's witness. And so he says, be strengthened in your inner being with Spirit's power. Now, I know some powerful people. They accomplish amazing things. But they can't accomplish far more abundantly than I can imagine because they're trusting their own power. Power in our world, that's human power. It's limited. Even though sometimes we think it's not, it's limited. It's finite. But the Spirit's power, God's power, it's infinite. Our power, flawed. God's power, perfect in action. And when the Spirit's power is aligned with God's will, anything can happen. And so Paul is praying and knows that the only way we can really experience the awesomeness of what God can do in the world through us and in us is for the Spirit to dwell in our hearts. And so he asks God to fill the people of those churches with the fullness of God, with that Spirit. Now, in order for the Spirit to fill us, we have to invite it in, right? And at our baptisms, we believe that we were baptized with the Holy Spirit. But how many of us really live as though the Spirit is alive and well and living in our hearts and in our souls? How many of us express that Spirit's life in our lives? We've got to allow the Spirit to work in us. So, are we praying for the Spirit? Are we listening for the Spirit? Are we giving the Spirit space in our lives to empower us? Or are our fears of change, our fears of failure, or our knowing what we know getting in the way? There's no doubt that there's great value in knowing things, right? I mean, we go to school to learn. And in a way, all of life is about learning. And we continue to learn it. And every day, we have the opportunity to learn something new about God by the witness of the Spirit in our hearts. But when we think about knowledge and knowing, we usually think about head knowledge, facts and figures and reality, right? And so knowledge is all about facts and what you can read, what you can find out, what you can research, what somebody else has proven, what you've proven. And we've learned it, and in some cases we memorize it, and in some cases, if we're really wise, we apply that knowledge. What if we place the same importance that our society, that our world places on knowing, on imagining? When's the last time you used your imagination? Can you remember? Some research shows that by 11 years of age, we've worked imagination right out of the life of kids. But lo and behold, it can be renewed. Imagination is something that can fill us with hope. So, in a hopeless world, there's probably little imagination that's actually happening. Paul uses that word, that Greek word that means imagine, purposefully, because he's challenging those people to see beyond their walls, to see beyond their current reality, and see all the possibilities that God can do. And then he says, what you can see, what you can imagine, what you can think of, God can do more. So God is not limited. It's we that are limited. So knowledge is black and white in its factual basis, right? It's black and white. However, life lived is rarely black and white, even though some people want to believe that their truth is the absolute truth, the only truth. In reality, truth is pretty hard to come by. Absolute truth, that is. Life lived in black and white, on and off, yes and no, can be a very dull life. And it can be almost like not living at all. It's certainly not necessarily life-giving. We live a lot of life in gray area, don't we? As we face changes. Knowing and being sure of our knowing sometimes can be a limit on our ability to imagine and be creative. And if we completely do away with our imagination, well, the world's not going to change. Because if we can't imagine a different world, we can't be a different world. If we can't imagine a different life, we can't live a different life. If we can't imagine that God can work wonders and miracles, they won't happen. In many ways, what we believe, what we imagine, what we dream, is the source of what actually happens. When's the last time you had a dream for your future? When's the last time you listened to your heart and not your mind? When is the last time that you looked up in the sky and you said, God, whatever you want to fill me with, I'm ready. Whatever you want to do through me, I'm ready. Give me the imagination to see what's possible and then take me beyond. I don't know, I haven't prayed that prayer in a while, have you? It's scary to pray that prayer. Because we don't know what God's going to ask us to do. Right? And that's where we come back to what Paul says about being rooted and grounded in love. You see, we go back to God's love. It's always the basis for everything. And God may ask us to do some pretty remarkable things. We call on the Spirit and we allow it to drive us and allow it to work through us. And if we depend on God for power on our own, it'll be amazing. The things that we can do, the hearts we can touch, the people we can love. It'll be amazing how many people hear about Jesus Christ, how many people see you living your life and want to know your God. If we ask God with open arms and open hearts and open souls and openness to God's movement to show us, to take us beyond our imagination, what will that mean for University Church? I don't know. But I know one thing. And Paul reminds us of it. Whatever it is, God is there. God is with us. God is loving us through it, empowering us to do it. Oh, University Church, we haven't done anything yet compared to what God can do and will do through us. You see, because God is able to accomplish abundantly far more than we can ask or imagine when we allow the Spirit to dwell in our hearts and fill us with the fullness of God. And we allow God to take all our gifts and all of our energies and all of who we are. And instead of just knowing our faith and knowing our facts of the Bible, we actually live the Bible and live our faith and live the love and live the acceptance and live the helping and live the reaching out and live the witness and tell our stories and share our love and move beyond these walls and ask God to do whatever God wants to through us. Wow. Wow. Do we dare pray that prayer? What do you think, University? Do we pray that prayer today? Do we dare? Are we willing to open up our imaginations and let God work? Are we willing to open our hearts and let God come and dwell in them? Are we willing to go wherever God calls us, to reach to whomever God calls us to reach to? Are we willing? Because I know God will make us able if we're willing. And then God will say, well done, good and faithful servants. You have accomplished abundantly far more than you ever dreamed you could. May that be true. Amen.